Portsmouth nestles the mighty deep Piscataqua River, a thoroughfare of commerce and opportunity since the early 1600s. An abundance of natural resources in and around the river enticed explorers, traders, fishermen, and sea captains to this outpost near the sea. A celebrated arts and culinary destination today, Portsmouth was once a bustling maritime center and a hotbed of the American Revolution that gained acclaim as New Hampshire's port city. Portsmouth is a city of bridges and churches with an iconic market square. It is also a city of neighborhoods, including one near the river in the North End. Immigrants from several regions in Italy began to settle in Portsmouth's North End in 1905. Over time, a Little Italy sector emerged, featuring bakeries, shops, barbershops, corner markets, and social clubs. Most Italian men worked in constructions, shoe factories, at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, and for the railroad. Little did these working-class settlers or their descendants realize that the distinct, vibrant neighborhood they created and loved would be targeted by the city and demolished through urban renewal.
What I remember the most about the North End was walking up the railroad tracks and just seeing all the wonderful people outside and going to my grandfather's house on Saturdays and Sundays.
Can you still smell the sauce?
Yes, as soon as you hit the sidewalk and you open the side door to my grandfather's house, you could smell the bread, the sauce. You could actually smell the lupinis, the little beans that were in the water. Used to keep in a little barrel in the kitchen with a cover on it.
Oh yeah.
You could smell the lupinis. He had the scoop in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did they have a garden too?
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. Huge garden. Tomatoes, vegetables, everything. Yeah.
Can you give us maybe your favorite story from growing up in the North End?
I got 1,000 of them.
Well, let's start with the first one.
All right. The first one will be with my mother. She went for her license and she was in her 50s. We were shocked that she passed the test and all that. She was not a very good driver. So one day downtown, she was parking the car and she can't get in one parking space, so she needs two. So there was two parking spaces. She parked the car and she went shopping. When she came back, there was one car, was her car, there was only one parking space left. And there was a guy there, he was going to pull in, and my mother asked him if he would please pull out so she could get the car out and he wouldn't hit it. And he was, come on, lady. So he moved the car and all that. So my mother got in it and everything, and she didn't. It was about a minute or two, she hadn't moved. So the guy got out of his car and he goes, "What's the matter, lady? Did you forget your keys?" And my mother says, "No, I got in the wrong car."
Oh, beautiful. Was that right in the North End?
Right in downtown Portsmouth.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I am so blessed to have lived on Russell Street. I grew up on Russell Street until I was in high school.
That's right.
Probably my junior year in high school.
That's right.
A couple of memories. My father loved the beach, and even though he worked second shift, he always found time to take us to the beach. And so he would pile as many kids from Russell Street, I'm sure you remember going.
I do.
That wanted to go. And we'd sit in the back of the truck, which is totally illegal today, but we'd sit in lawn chairs and drive to the beach and spend a couple of hours, and then he'd take us home. Yeah. And everyone loved it.
I actually remember one time going to the beach, and he made us, I think we were going to go get ice cream, and he made us jog from Wallace Sands to Pirates Cove to get the ice cream, and it felt like I was running the Boston Marathon.
Oh yeah.
And I remember.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He would do that. He would absolutely do that. And then one of my really fondest memories is because he worked second shift, there were a couple of times that Graham had to go in, my mother had to go into the hospital, and so I stayed with Aunt Jo. And of course, Tito and Pia lived with her. Mm-hmm. And I would be sleeping in the bedroom where Nani, Tito, had to come through to get up to the attic. And he would come through. He loved kids. He loved us. Even though he seemed like he was a curmudgeon, he was.
Let's keep it clean.
He was. He loved kids. So he'd say, "Good night, dear," and he'd sing his opera.
Wow.
All the way up he loved opera. All the way up the stairs with his stogie.
Yeah.
And his cane. I'm like, oh gosh.
Wow, what a cool memory.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a wonderful place to be. I spent a lot of time there.
Right here, there was a metal shop here. There was a metal shop here, and the guy used to put, this is hard to believe, sheet metal out back. He used to throw the stuff out back, and his backyard was on the side of High Street, across the street from my house. And all the kids, we used to jump over the fence, and we used to get on the street metal, even during the summertime, slide down the hill, because there was a big hill out back there, and we'd slide down. And now this corrugated steel, I mean, this would cut your leg off. Remember, Philip? And these guys would run up and down, and we'd go up and down on that. Nobody ever got hurt. It was unbelievable. They used to come out and holler at us all the time about doing that. They said, "You kids are going to kill yourself," but it never happened.
Do you have a favorite memory from
Russell Street?
Russell Street, yeah.
Oh, God. Just in general, running around my grandmother's house while she cooked.
I know, me too.
Having her sisters there, sitting around the table, the old Naugahyde cushion.
Bar stool, yeah.
Bar stools.
Yeah.
I mean, it just was simple, but it's warming. That's what I remember, how warm it was.
Yeah.
And easy.
I can still remember the sauce and the meatballs and
Oh,
the big pot.
And we'd go and we'd grab a hunk of Italian bread and dip it in the sauce, and she always shoot us off, but we managed to do
Tapped
it each
us
and
on the
every
head.
time.
My favorite story didn't take place on High Street. It took place on Market Street. There was a place there called Pope's Cafe, and it was like the local watering hole. And my father, who had 4 brothers, a lot of times on Saturday afternoon, they would meet there and have a few beers. And once in a while, I'd get to go with him. And I liked it there because they used to have a bowling machine, which was just, you put in a nickel and you got this disc and you would skid it down the thing and you would knock pins down with it. And so I'd get to do that, and every once in a while my uncles would throw me a nickel or they'd buy me an orange soda. Well, we were there one Saturday and we started hearing sirens. And across the street from Pope's was the old Consolidated Coal Company. And somehow a fire had started in there. So you can imagine a place that had coal, what that fire was going to be like. And there were trucks coming from everywhere, sirens and smoke and everything. And the window at Pope's was these thick block windows that were made out of glass. So you couldn't see through them, but the heat actually cracked the glass, right? So watching this, and it was to me, it was like so exciting. And the guys were still there drinking beer, right? And finally we went home, and my mother was hysterical. She asked my father, "Where in the hell have you been?" He said, "We were at Pope's." And I started telling her.
In the 1930s, the Pesarisi family, 4 boys and 2 girls, were living in the cramped quarters of a 2-family which fronted on Russell Street. The backyard contained a large yard and a garden that reached Deer Street, and it was an ideal playground for all the kids. My youngest brother, Adam, known as Damo, he loved the movies. Almost every Saturday afternoon, he and his young cousins and friends would head up High Street to the square and their destination, the Arcadia Theater. This meant double feature westerns, along with serials that ran week to week. When the first showing was over and the next began, sometimes they were still there. Soon it was supper time, and often my mother would send one of my oldest brothers to fetch Damo and bring him home. In 1937, we moved to our new home on Thaxter Road, a 4-bedroom, exclamation point. In those days,
That was a mansion.
yeah, it seemed far, far away from the North End. When Damo learned we were moving, his first question was, do they have movie theaters there?
Well, my best memory was playing with all the kids
Yeah.
in the neighborhood.
There were a ton, weren't there?
There was a lot. And in those days, when you came home from school, at my house, and I'm sure I'm speaking for a lot of the kids in the neighborhood, your parents threw you out because your mother was usually cooking supper.
Or cleaning.
And the houses were not that big inside, so they just get out
Yeah.
and play.
Yeah.
You didn't stay in the house.
Yeah.
So we'd go outside and we would play all kinds of games, horror room, kick the can. But the best one, my favorite time was, I grew up on Russell Street, and right next to my grandmother's house was a tenement house. We lived on one side, she lived on the other. It was a Donnelly advertising sign, huge Donnelly advertising. And we used to play tag on that sign. And boy,
Was that the billboard?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and some of those kids, what they did on that sign, I kind of hung on, because I saw some kids fall.
Would they climb up to the top?
They would climb up the top. And there was one kid, Freddie Melanson, he would walk on the very top board on the sign and walk.
Whoa.
If
Like
he-
tightrope.
Yeah, I mean,
I can remember his grandmother, just like my grandmother. They sit on the bench. They had a bench out front of the house, and they all had their long dresses. And in the dresses was always a handkerchief, and the handkerchief was always tied. Inside the tight was maybe $1.50 worth of change. In between, this is how we'd get to get an ice cream or a snow cone when they come around periodically. Because the mothers and fathers, the whole neighborhood, they didn't have nothing. The families were big, and they were the Ciottis. They had like 8 or 9. Caninos had 7 or 8. The Piolas, they had the whole tribe, and they were related to the Gallows down here.
The Giampas.
I mean,
We had so many cousins, we didn't even know what was going on.
yeah,
And then you have second cousins, and then you couldn't sneeze. They would hear about it in Boston in 2 seconds. And that's the honest to God's truth. Your mother, how we used to cry from laughing though, huh?
Oh, it was a wonderful time, and the one thing I got from it, it was very safe. Maybe the rest of the citizens didn't want to dare move and get into an Italian neighborhood. I don't know. But I had no problem. My father used to whistle, and he could whistle quite loud. And no matter where I was, middle of a baseball game or whatever, off I'd go. Boom, bang, that was it. And one of the earliest memories I can remember, Terry mentioned Tia and Pia. Tito and Pia. Softly. They owned a little corner store.
On the corner of Wall and Russell.
And it was much bigger than half this room. And somehow I'm in J.J. Newberry's, and I get lost in that Metropolitan store. And guess who finds me and brings me home? Piers Offley. So that's how the neighborhood was. You didn't venture out of it. You went to the perimeters, but you were very well protected.
My Aunt Rose, when she was about 10 years old, and her father brought her out back and said, okay, I'm gonna teach you how to kill a chicken.
Oh.
So he had everything all set, the chicken's there, and he says, now you hold the chicken and I'm gonna swing the axe and don't flinch. Because if you flinch, there could be a problem. So we swung the axe, she flinched, she screamed, she went inside, she went upstairs, and she was coming down the stairs later, and she heard her father say to her mother, how is she gonna get a man if she can't kill a chicken? And I'm like, man, that is just perfect.
Those are life lessons.
Yes, life lessons.
I remember the most is how everyone in the family lived on Russell Street.
Right.
You could visit one grandparent and go down the street a little bit and visit the other, and all the aunts and uncles lived there, cousins, and also your friends.
It was, everybody was there, your family, your friends, that was your community.
That was our community, absolutely.
We just had beautiful days every day. You know, we just loved being together. It was peaceful then in those days.
What was Sunday dinner like, or lunch, or what was your feast like on a Sunday?
Oh, spaghetti, of course.
Lord.
My mother made her own.
A roast spaghetti?
You know, found noodles, yes.
My Uncle Johnny used to say 3 things you can expect on a Sunday dinner: soup, sauce, and a fight. And you know what? And that's the honest to God's truth.
So I'm here in front of 101 Market Street, which is the former location of Mario's Meat Market. So, and I'm talking to Jimmy Morrissey. So tell us a little bit about what you remember about Mario's.
Well, it was quite the place because the whole Italian used to come here to get their meat. And all the people that came in, we knew them by their first name and their families, their mother and fathers and all of that. And Mickey would be out back cutting the meat, and people would come in and tell him exactly what he wanted for the meat and all this and that. And Mickey was quite the guy because there was only Mickey's way of doing things, and that was it. He didn't want to hear about anything else, just his way. And it was really something because he had a lot of characters that came in, and he would tell them what to do, where to stand, what to order. And when they were saying what they were going to have, he'd say, "No, you don't want that. I'll get you something. You'll be all set." So that was it. And the big meat box out back there, where he used to cut the meat, people used to come in 11:30, 12 o'clock in the morning, and he'd have dinner. And there'd be all kinds of people that would come in. There'd be bankers, lawyers, city workers, guys picking up the trash. We'd all come in, and it'd be like 50 cents to get a meal. And it didn't matter. You could be sitting with the mayor, or you could be sitting with a convict. And we had a heck of a time there. And this went on for years and years. And Mickey was great with his Italian sausages and stuff them in their sauces. And everybody loved it. They couldn't wait to come here.
It was more than a meat market. It was the market. If people wanted groceries, this is where they came. If they just needed a loaf of bread or milk, there were all these little corner markets around the neighborhood. Patsy's store, there was Bartola's, Tito's. People could go there and get 1 or 2 items. But if they had some more serious shopping to do, they would come in here and get it. So I was here a lot, and in fact, I ended up marrying Mickey's daughter.
Oh.
So that was the deal. I remember coming in.
That is big. That's big.
Then the night I gave her a ring, came in and told Mickey, you know, and he just...
Did you get his blessing?
He just looked at me and he said, "What are you, foolish?" that was Mickey. So you could tell he was overwhelmed.
That's a yes.
So I figured, well, the good thing is I'm going to have free bologna for the rest of my life. and she's been giving me bologna for the rest of my life. So it's all worked out.
So I'm here with Donna Zoffley Penelakis, and Donna grew up on Russell Street, and she's going to bring us by where Tito's Market was.
So my grandfather's store, Tito and Pia, was on the corner of Russell Street and Wall Street, or Russell Alley, if you will. So I would say it would be about right here, and the way we found it is that large rock right there was at the very end, and us kids used to sit there and watch the trains go by.
Philip, remember the Moffat Lad?
Yeah, the Moffat Lad House, it was, I've lived in Portsmouth my whole life. I've never been in it, but I've been all around it because we could approach it from the High Street side in what the Moffett Ladd house, which was really rare in the neighborhood, was grass.
Yeah.
So if we wanted to play tackle football,
we'd go there.
We would jump over this wooden fence that actually had barbed wire on it.
Yeah.
And we'd play on these, it was these beautiful little terrace lawns that are in there.
Yeah.
But we'd never get to finish a game because somebody would always call the police.
Yeah. This is one of our fishing holes here in Portsmouth. All us kids used to come down here and go fishing. The pollock used to run down here, the shiners, and you could get them almost by the bucket full. It was unbelievable. And all the Jurassic kids off of the island, they had boats. And we'd come down here and do our thing. And we always had a good time. But our parents didn't want us down here because at that time, there was a really bad waterfront. It was all, you know, drunks and hobos and stuff like that down here. So they didn't want us around here. Right, Billy? Tell them.
That was it. It was, yeah, sometimes, remember, sometimes we wouldn't quite make it to church.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Our parents would give us a quarter for the church, for the basket at church. We'd come down here. This is where Newark's got started.
Right.
There was a little shack there, and he would sell clams.
Yeah.
Right, and we'd go in and we'd buy raw clams for bait.
Right.
So that quarter would go for bait,
yeah.
And the other quarter we'd buy a couple of sodas.
Yeah.
And we'd go down and we'd sit on the dock and we would fish, because you couldn't take the fish home because we were in church, right? But we figured it was probably okay. Jesus was a fisherman, right?
Right,
so
exactly.
He probably would understand. Yeah, you know, it's like, yeah, so.
My name's Bob Thorson. I was the planning director for the city of Portsmouth from 1971 to 1977. That was well after the urban renewal project started. And under New Hampshire law, urban renewal projects are carried out by the housing authority. So I didn't have any role in the actual urban renewal project. That had been started before I came, and it was carried out by the urban renewal division of the Portsmouth Housing Authority.
What was your role then in implementing or in carrying this out? Was there a role that you played in this?
Actually none, because of the way the law is structured, the city government does not get involved with it. They approve the actual concept of the urban renewal project, and they approve the funding of it, but they do not actually carry it out. So it's a separate governmental agency that's an authority, not a city government.
Right. Can we take a step back and maybe have you define what is or what was urban renewal?
Sure. Urban renewal is a federal program that was started in 1949. It actually was a successor to an earlier federal program called the Housing Program from 1937. And they added urban renewal to it with the idea of doing a much more comprehensive restructuring of the urban core of a lot of American cities. And they provided a great deal of funding. It usually was a 75-25% match. The local government came up with a match, and then the 75% was paid for by the federal government. And what happened was that the Housing Authority would apply to the federal government for a planning grant. Then they would do the planning of the potential urban renewal project, and then it would be approved by the federal government, and then they would get the money for actual implementation of the proposed program.
And what was the purpose and the objective of urban renewal? What was it meant to do for the community?
It's basically to revitalize a community and to increase the economic structure of the community. And what they were trying to do was remove blighted and substandard structures. It became extremely controversial because whole neighborhoods were wiped out. You can see that right here. And so by the late 60s and early 70s, it was a very reviled federal program. and was called for to be terminated, and it actually was terminated in 1973. So the urban renewal as a federal program lasted from 1949 to 1973. So
And
approximately 25 years.
how many structures were part of the urban renewal project, and what was the criteria for choosing which homes and which neighborhoods to address?
Well, they did surveys for addressing, various neighborhoods. And the first urban renewal project in Portsmouth was the Marcy Street Urban Renewal Project, is what we now call Strawberry Bank. That was a 10-acre project. The proposal there was to do another total demolition of all the structures. They were, quote, substandard, blighted, and these are very loaded words that were used by the federal government, and that you had to apply their criteria to analyzing the structures. And they were going to replace all those structures with garden apartments. And when the proposal was sent to the federal government for approval, they turned it down. They said it was not economically feasible to pursue it. The rents would have to be too high for people to live in the project. So that was terminated, or that was not approved. And what came next was a group of preservationists and some people from out of town and other civic leaders decided to try to do a, quote, colonial village. And they came up with the idea of imitating Williamsburg, which was basically supported by the Rockefellers. So we were minus a Rockefeller or two. And so they finally did get approval to pursue that, and Strawberry Bank Museum, or Strawberry Bank, was approved as the developer. And it took them from the mid-50s to the mid-60s to do their improvements, and actually only one house was completed by mid-1960s when they opened to the public as a historic neighborhood.
So did they use that as a model for going into the North End area?
No, it wasn't really a model. What happened was, by 1961, they were already looking for another project to do. And the planning board said, we think you should look at the Vaughan Street area because that is an area that we think is in need of revitalization or renewal. And so by 1963, they came up with a planning program to study the Vaughan Street project. And they eventually approved it in 1966, and it continued till 1975.
The buyouts had taken place. The people knew that they were going to have to leave. I mean, they fought it and fought it and fought it, but the decisions had been made. So people weren't keeping up those wonderful little front gardens and things and everything. I mean, the place had a charm, if you can remember back to the late 50s or whatever, and people really cared. It didn't matter whether there was siding on the building or not. I mean, there was care. But sort of a depression took over that, we're losing our lives and our neighborhood.
So what was that like during that period, that between when they heard about it till kind of it happened? What was going on?
Taking place is, I was 8 years old when they started taking down some of the homes.
Right.
And right about when I was 9 years old, they took down Paul's grandmother's house, the Bell Mysteries, directly across from my grandfather's house. And I remember my Uncle Johnny Paola sitting on the stoop crying, watching the bulldozer taking the home down.
Yep.
And they were taking the home in back of the Bell Mysteries. They took the Whites home. And the Caninos were they were sticklers. Connie Gallagher, Connie Canino, she wasn't going anywhere.
Right.
And she stayed in that house till the last hurrah, right on Russell Street.
Right, right.
She wouldn't go. The bulldozer was right in front of her home, and she said she wasn't going anywhere.
Was that a topic of conversation a lot
very
in that
much
time?
So. Always. They cried a lot. Every time you walked to go see my grandfather's house, they were all outside, a lot of the Italian families talking which house was going to be taken and why they were taking their homes.
It was a sad time. It really was, because what existing we had for friends, and it was a tight neighborhood. I had a lot of tight friends. My sister had friends. My brothers had friends. All of a sudden, I got nobody.
Right, right.
And they're all over Portsmouth. And back then, you just couldn't decide you're going to walk halfway across town to see a buddy. Yeah. That wasn't going to happen. It didn't happen really to me. I went to junior high, 7th and 8th grade. And unfortunately, I never got any classes with my ex-friends.
Right.
That didn't happen until I got into high school, where we all blended in together. So there was a time there that urban renewal wasn't such a great thing. Uncle Albie lived right next door, and we used to do everything together. We ate together, all the kids played together. We'd be in the backyard for barbecues or everything like that. Periwinkles, we'd have sauce with that, get the little tag all. So all that growing up was great. And then all of a sudden, it was like, this wasn't gonna happen anymore. And all the people that were around us, all Italians, in every house we could go up and down. And they all went to a different part of the city because you couldn't all just go in one place.
Right, right.
And
did they dread it? Did they?
Yes, they did. Most people did not want to do it because we had an uncle, Pepe. He was on the water down there, which was Noble's Island. He had a beautiful home there, right, and a big dock out back and all that. We used to go swimming off the rocks and all that, and it was gone. He ended up being on a little housing development off the highway. He didn't like that at all.
Did you and your family actually watch when your house was being torn down?
Yeah.
What was that like? Do you remember?
Yeah, we do. We remember them all. I remember going down Russell Street and seeing the different houses that were knocked down. First, they sat there for a long time, nobody in them and all that, and all boarded up. But when they started coming down, they tore them all down. And it was unbelievable that what you remembered,
right,
from all the people,
right,
there. It was amazing.
So
and it was very hard going to another neighborhood. Right. You didn't know nobody, and there weren't many Italians there because they were all in different parts of the city.
Right.
So it really broke up the whole community. It was never like it was when we first started.
When urban renewal came along, like I said, it was about the time I entered in high school when they were talking about it and when it actually happened. It was pretty traumatic for everybody.
Right.
And the aunts needed to find a place to live, with my cousin, and my father had come back from Thule, and so that wasn't a big deal. We moved into Elwyn Park,
mm-hmm,
and
I think that's where a lot of people
went to.
Yeah.
But one of my aunts live on Hill Street. One lived on Islington Street in an apartment. The other got married and lived behind the Immaculate Conception on that street there. I don't remember what the street name was. But yeah, my grandmother had died before that happened, so it was just my grandfather left in the house. And I'm not sure, but I think that kind of killed him. Everybody was gone. He was 80 years old. He was in really good shape. He used to dress up in his suit and his hat and walk 5 miles a day, wow, like an older Italian gentleman would do, in the old country. And I think that just took all the life away from him.
Buy a house and then they take it away from you. She just couldn't grasp that and understand how that could be done in this country, that they would do that.
When they did that, how did she feel?
Oh, devastation.
What did she do?
She was never the same after that, I have to say. She was very bitter.
The Bond Street Urban Renewal Project, North End, that was torn down by the Bond Street Urban Renewal Project, it was passed in July of 1966, encompassed up to from Market Street over to Green Street, where a lot of the Italian North End was, and then down Deer Street to the corner where the Bridge Street is, and then up Congress Street, which was our central downtown. And a lot of the buildings right on Congress Street weren't taken, but everything between was. About 300 families, 66 small businesses, and about 200 buildings, thereabouts, 30 acres of downtown land, and we were just thrown out in 1966.
Which was devastating for everyone there.
So can you explain or describe for me where exactly the urban renewal took place, what those areas were, and maybe what replaced them?
Sure. So this is Deer Street right here. This is Congress Street, and this is Market Square. So the Urban Renewal Project went from Congress Street. This is the YWCA, now Jimmy's Jazz Club. Mm-hmm. That was one of 4 buildings that actually ended up getting saved. The building that was Margerson's Furniture is now going to be NovaCare. And what was a American Telephone and Telegraph switching station, which is where there's a restaurant there now. And this was the old VFW building. It's a concrete block building. It's now gone, and it's going to be converted to housing. But so and then this is Maplewood Avenue, and then what they did is they extended Maplewood Avenue up through here to connect to Middle Street. This is the triangle of the north end. This is where the Sheridan Hotel is. This is the Piscataqua River. This is Market Street right here. The end of the Urban Renewal Project is up on Rains Avenue, and Vaughn Street is the street that the project is named after, and it went all the way up to Congress Street at the time. Now this section is a pedestrian mall. Cemeteries here. This is where the railroad track goes through. So that's what comprises the entire urban renewal area. And as I said before, it was 30 acres. It's a fairly large project area. And in contrast, the first urban renewal project was 10 acres, so it was a third of the size.
And did they look for concentration of houses? Like, what was some of their criteria? I noticed that there are many structures to the right that weren't part of the project, and many surrounding areas were not. They were pretty specific. How did they decide what?
Well, it's sort of an art in terms of characterizing where you draw the boundary line. They had some realistic limits in terms of how big the project could be. Mm-hmm. Number one, and then also I think they tried to stay away from structures that would be very difficult to deal with. Mm-hmm. Very large structures and so forth. So. But it's all, they did have other boundaries, so it changed over time. But this is the one they ended up with.
Right. So it was sort of malleable for a while until they probably had to implement it.
Of course, they did their analysis, and that in part informed where they decided those boundaries should be.
I think it was devastating, actually. And it was very disruptive for these poor people that worked. Like my father worked 3 jobs. They worked their fingers to the bones to have what they had, and then to be given peanuts. Basically, luckily Nunu owned this house, so he had some place to go.
But Donna, he didn't buy it until urban renewal.
Yeah.
But what do you know if they were upset because they got peanuts and had to move, and it was
all of it.
Because everyone was together.
I think it was all of it, but I think that was the frosting on the cake.
Right. Because don't forget, Their mother and father lived there. Their sisters lived there. Their nieces, their nephews, their friends.
Joe Zoffley had to move up to Nottingham.
Yeah.
She lived on Russell Street.
She didn't seem like she was ever the same when she moved up there to me.
Oh, she was.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think she was.
I thought it was. I hated going up there, seeing her up there.
Yeah.
Well, they lived in the basement.
Yeah.
Until they built.
Yeah, until they built. I mean, it was awful.
And and probably that was the catalyst where people just didn't get together anymore.
Well, that's
They
true.
didn't.
That's true, Julie.
They didn't.
Because it's easy. You're going down there.
Yeah.
It's a habit. You're going to see so and so.
Well, you
the
see
other
him
one.
just taking a walk.
I think that somehow they thought that it was a good idea to, in the name of progress. They thought it was progress, but I mean, and it was bad enough that they tore everything down with total no regard whatsoever. But what the big stinger was what they put up. You know, it's what they put up.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, that's the amazing. That was the amazing thing is you lost an entire community for something that looked like it dropped down from outer space.
My father and mother were saved and saved and saved. And in 1963, they bought a house in Greenland, so we left. So we were gone. And I think urban renewal was in July of 1966.
Right.
So my grandmother was the only one there, right? So she's the one that got the brunt of it.
Right.
And she bought that house back in the 30s. And she was an immigrant from Sicily. Came to Boston, met her husband, and they both moved to, they bought the house on Russell Street. They moved in. She raised her four children, Sadie, Ann, Joe, and Michael, my father. There. So she was there from, I'd say, the 30s right up until they took the house away in the 60s. And boy, she had a huge garden out back. I mean, she had a garden in the back that it was a vegetable that grew on this globe. She had it in the back of that garden.
Yeah, a lot of families had these incredible victory gardens, and that's how they fed their families.
Yeah. So she took the brunt, and she didn't understand a lot because she's an immigrant to this country. She could speak very good English. Like I said, she read and she wrote for people, right? But she didn't understand the politics, and she didn't understand, this is my house. My husband and I bought it. I mean, they can take it away from me. She didn't understand that, right? So she got the worst of it.
Sort of part and parcel of the whole thinking about urban renewal back in the late 50s and 60s, that this was trying to solve a national problem. I mean, I do remember right after World War II, on our way to vacation in Maine, we stopped off in Boston for my father's business. And just like Portsmouth, it was really deferred maintenance for 30 or 40 years.
Right.
And it was sad. And I understand why people wanted to renovate cities.
Right.
They were dead.
Right.
The way they did it was disastrous.
In '68, a group of citizens formed Portsmouth Preservation, Inc. To try to challenge the total clearance concept. What they wanted to do was to create, retain initially about 88 structures and reuse them in their historic context and sell them off to businesses and for residences. They basically were not successful in getting the Urban Renewal Authority to support that on a very large scale.
Mm-hmm.
They did, however, by about 1970, agree to save 14 structures, which became known as the Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And that, of that, there were about 4 structures that were on their original foundations. The remaining structures were moved into the area from other parts of the Urban Renewal Project.
Let's talk a little bit about the Hill and the homes that are here that were either here to start with or moved from the North End when it was demolished.
Yeah, a lot of these homes that are on this side of Deer Street, a lot of them came from the North End. That was Little Italy, right over here. Her great aunt and my second cousin Jenny Gallo Gobby's house is right down over there. They saved her house. Ginny Reese's mother's house is down over here. The Forelli's house is over here. I believe the Noto's house is over here. But these are a lot of the homes that they saved. They just set right up over here. So when the Italian families found out that they were going to move their homes over here, they asked if they could keep it and move across the street where they were going to place their homes, and they told them that they would have to pay to have their home moved over here, and it was so much money, so pretty much that they didn't follow suit. Your great aunt Jenny's house, Jenny Gallo Gobby's house, is this blue one right here.
Oh, wow.
And this used to be on Russell Street. If we go this way, I'll show you. This building here, when I was a kid, was always here. It was an art studio right over here to the far left. On this street, Peter Luca, that owned Luca's restaurant, he lived on High Street. The Cante family lived on this street. Actually, the Lazowskis, Carolyn's mother, she was a Gerasi. She lived on High Street. And as we walk up further this way,
That's an original building.
that is Josie Sclarito's house. The Sclaritos grew up in this house, Josie Sclarito and her husband, and they still, believe it or not, own it. Her son owns the house.
Wow.
And they never took her house from her. This was Julie's and my second cousin Jenny Gallo Gobby's home. And this home here was on Russell Street as you're going down the hill facing the salt piles. Actually, it was 2 doors down from the park. So as you walk down here on High Street, where you meet those buildings right there where the Sheridan is, you would have a huge hill. You would walk up where the gate is. You would see the merry-go-round, and the Ciottis would be over here to the left, and to the right would be my cousin Jenny Gobby's house. Your great-grandmother, my great-aunt Michelina, Michelina lived on this side after they took the north end. She lived on this side and stayed with Jenny. And Jenny lived on this side. Then Jenny, as she grew older, she moved to Goslar Meadows with her son, and she rented out her home to her sister Mary, Mary Gallo Francois, and they resided here also. I spent Christmas in this house with a family when I was about 8 years old.
The Historic District ordinance that was passed in 1977 was actually a result of a group of banks proposing to demolish several buildings in the downtown, literally almost simultaneously in 1974. Part of, in terms of urban renewal, the work of Portsmouth Preservation sort of established the idea of reuse of historic structures. So that was sort of already part of the culture. But the city government in 1974, as a result of these banks proposing to demolish their properties in order to put drive-in facilities, there were 3 of them. One was Indian Head Bank, one was Portsmouth Savings Bank, and one was First National Bank. And so we passed an ordinance, literally within 2 weeks, the first reading of an ordinance, to stop the demolition of those structures. And then we had literally 2 years of meetings with stakeholders to come up with a plan for saving, to create a historic district in the downtown, and to make sure that any decision that involved demolition of a historic structure was reviewed by the Historic District Commission before that demolition took place. And that basically has almost stopped most demolitions of historic structures and allowed the city to have a review and final decision on those historic districts.
those 14 buildings that were preserved were created by a group called the Portsmouth Preservation Incorporated, PPI. If it wasn't for them, there'd be a hotel there. They're heroes when you get down to it. I mean, they saved those houses.
And I hope that people who view this tape and people who are here can really learn something from it, something about being a neighbor, something about being close. It's really wonderful, and the North End was an absolutely beautiful neighborhood.
We were the Fiandacas. We lived next to the railroad track, and across from us were the Dorios, the DeStefanos, and the Caninos, and we're all quite close. And
my name is Diva Perini McDonald. I was born, brought up on Russell Street. First of all, I'd like to say how very, very proud I am of my heritage. My mom and dad came over from Italy, and I can remember so many stories that my dad used to tell me. We used to have so much fun on Russell Street, playing games, run, sheep, run, relievo, hide and seek, baseball, hoop-to-hoop, roller skating. We never had to leave our street for entertainment.
My name is Jane Cumble Perini. I was born in Sicily. I came to this country in 1928, the age of 8.
My name is Mundo Zoffoli. I come from Russell Street, born on Deer Street, a family of 8.
Learned that you are working on a documentary film, a documentary video on the history of the Portsmouth North End, and this is very important again because you, in this way, you remember, you protect your heritage, and you know the heritage is what we are, what we really are, so our origins. And so it's important really to cherish our origins, our heritage, because we have the duty to transmit the heritage to our sons, to our daughters, and to our offspring.
Son. This is my grandfather Dominic, my grandmother Philomena, my uncle Johnny Paola. Now this would be my Aunt Teresa's family from Boston. This is my cousin Rosemary, my cousin Lorraine, my cousin Barbara Champa, my cousin Phyllis Champa, my uncle Philly Champa, his friend, they used to call him John the Pollock, he brought with him. My Aunt Mary Paola McCumbee, her son Bobby McCumbee, her daughter Barbara Jean McCumbee, and her son Richard McCumbee, and my uncle Leslie McCumbee.
Look at this.
And half of us were not even thought of yet.
Right.
Did you know anybody in this fishing?
Yeah, no, just one or two.